Well, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me, and hopefully we have this thing set up where you can hear the voice and the volume. If the voice is too slow or too fast, always remember that in the post-production, when I put it back up on the internet, down here in the bottom, it'll have closed captions, and you can speed it up, slow it down. But this is a real interesting interview. It's with Kerry Cassidy, and it was done 2008. So this is quite a while ago, but I'm not going to try to explain everything. I'm going to just jump right on into the video, but I do want to make sure I'm live. That don't look right. Let me do this real quick. Okay, I know I'm live. I can see it. All right, that's my only way to see it. I can't see it if that's the case. So I know I'm live. I know we might not have a huge audience right now, but trust me, this information and the way I've got to put the truth out there. This eventually find a huge audience, and so if you like this video, hit that like button, smash, the subscribe and all that. All right, I'm gonna get right into the video.
Project Camelot interview. For several years, Kerry Cassidy and her partner Bill Ryan of Project Camelot had expressed an interest to interview James, the creator of the WingMakers, Lyricus, and Event Temple's websites and all of the content therein. James politely declined all interview requests until his first interview in April 2008 with his web manager, Mark Hempel. Then, in November 2008, James reached out to Kerry and Bill and offered to do an interview with them, which is included in its entirety in this document. Project Camelot, question 1. How much of the WingMakers story is true or based on fact? James, answer 1. The terrestrial storyline is based on a technique called sensory bilocation, SBL, which is similar to remote viewing in concept. This storyline is based on my investigations using this technique as it pertains to the ACIO, Incunabula, Illuminati, ET cover-ups, etc. These elements were then modified in name, identity, and locations in order to integrate with the mythological storyline of the WingMakers and retain the cloak that surrounds these organizations. It was not my purpose to expose these organizations or their dubious agendas. However, I was aware that many of the conspiratorial-minded were among those who cared the most about truth and uncovering it. The cosmological scope of the story is mythological, while the more terrestrial elements contained in the Neruda interviews are based on my experiences with SBL. Project Camelot, question 2. Some people studying and commenting on current events seem preoccupied with what are perceived by some to be discouraging messages of gloom or warnings of potential major problems. Others focus only on messages of hope and light and refuse to dwell on bad news. Although we have no trouble incorporating both views and understand that how they manifest will depend on each of us, some of our audience tend toward one view or the other. What is your own philosophy or that of those you represent about this dilemma, and what light can you shed on this ongoing debate between the two factions, both of whom care deeply about the future of our world? James, answer 2. The ominous situations of our world are very real. It is impossible to look at the policies of governments around the world and see coherence, benevolence, enlightened action, or, in general, behavioral intelligence as an outflow of equality and oneness. The human family has been bound up over thousands of generations, and each time returning to our home planet Earth for the sake of upgrading the previous generation's dominion, creature comforts, lifestyle, and technology, while the emotional maturity remains burrowed in the substrate of rape, abuse, enslavement, war, dishonesty, greed, government fraud, and 100 other vices of weak and disillusioned humans programmed to see only the outpicturing of the human mind and its systems of limitation. The human family is building a pyramid of manifested life across thousands of generations, and each new generation builds another layer, an upgrade of technology and lifestyle. We are nearing the apex of this pyramid where there is nothing left to add. The pyramid is completed, and we, each of us, must look at the pyramid we have constructed and ask ourselves how it exemplifies our transcendence, our true self. The pyramid of humanity is manifest in the three-dimensional world, but it derives from a set of constructs that are flawed. What are these constructs? What makes them flawed? How did humanity get off course to build structures of civilization and society that are such poor reflections of who we really are? There is a specific framework that has emerged over millions of years to induce humanity to the repetitive post of deficient civilization builders. In the context of your questions, I must begin by defining this framework in order to answer all of your questions with sufficient detail and bring some new texture and dimension to the conversation. This framework is known within Lyricus as the suppression of the sovereign integral. Its 9 primary components are delineated below. Before you, the reader, continue on, let me warn you that this is a sobering and direct analysis of the suppression framework, and I would advise everyone who reads this to remain neutral as they examine my answers. If you find the information feeling too heavy or evoking fear, set it aside or return to it later. This story is not for everyone. Some will feel threatened by it and react with a sense of alarm, and others will feel like someone pulled the rug from underneath them. If you feel any of this, you may not be prepared to confront these realities. The secret framework for the suppression of the sovereign integral. Human mind system, HS. The human mind system is separated into 3 primary functional mechanisms: the unconscious or genetic mind, the subconscious, and the conscious. These 3 components intermingle to form what most people term consciousness. The HMS is the most opaque and distorted veil that has stood between humanity and its true self, perverting its self-expression within the domains we call reality. The unconscious, genetic mind is the repository of all humanity. The subconscious is the repository of the family bloodlines, and the conscious mind is the repository of the individual. However, and this is important to understand, the foundational patterns of thought are primarily from the subconscious and genetic mind structures of consciousness. Thus, while the individual believes themselves to be individual, unique, separate, and one of a kind, in reality, they are not. Not in the context of HMS. You can conceptualize yourself as a copy of the human family folded inside a copy of your parents and bloodlines, placed into an individualized expression. You. The you is an HMS particularized into one expression, but its roots are entirely planted in the soil of humanity and parental lineage, all of which is downloaded into the developing fetus before birth. This is precisely why, after 10,000 generations, we continue to operate in the same patterns of greed, separation, and self-destruction. The image in the mirror is upgraded with better clothing and more sophisticated masks, but underneath, the image remains the same feelings, the same thoughts, and the same behaviors. Social and cultural engineering via the entertainment and educational systems conspire to entrain the individual during their developmental years, 3 to 14 years old, activating the programs and subsystems of the HMS to ensure that the individual is properly prepared to conform to the reality matrix of their time and place. Even those who are nonconformists who fancy themselves outside the box are well within the perimeter of the HMS. Money, power, grid, and PG. The reason for the human mind system to exist is for the elite to exercise control over the money, power, grid. Money is the prime objective of the elite because it imbues power to those who possess it. Money takes many forms, including assets of precious metals and petroleum, land or real estate, minerals, and products and services. Money is the god of the elite, and their banks are the religious institutions in which they can worship their god. The corporate elite, government elite, underground elite, and banking elite constitute the MPG controllers. Those in positions of power, especially within the banking sector, are beholden to the MPG and will do everything possible to tighten their controls of the MPG and manipulate the human family to serve their agenda. Interdimensional universe structure, IUS. This is the structure of reality domains and how they interface with one another. IUS is a very, very complex subject to disclose in a format such as this, so I will only touch the surface. Human beings are both dimensional and interdimensional. First source is all of us. It is the collective us. It is not a god living in some distant pocket of the universe. First source is the human collective unencumbered with the HMS. First source divided itself into individualized expressions, us. In the beginning, we inhabited dimensions that were not material, but existed at quantum levels of time and space. However, as the dimensions grew in density through the expansion of creation, our creation, we, as individualized, interdimensional beings, were seduced to enter the human body. This seduction was a co-conspiracy of forces led by Anu, the king of the Anunnaki, who required enslaved workers to mine the physical gold that was present on Earth in abundance. Those beings we now consider the Atlanteans were interdimensional living upon Earth, and Anu, with great cunning, convinced them to embody in human instruments. This embodiment was a grand experiment in human engineering, and the human mind system, HMS, was at the core of this project. Anu realized that the only way to enslave the Atlanteans was to sheath them in a mind system that would reduce their capacity to express their true nature, and instead, express the programs embedded within the HMS. These programs were the creation of Anu and his scientists. God Spirit Soul Complex, GSSC. This is the central element of the HMS that anchors separation. The individualized human being, free of the HMS, is called the sovereign integral in the WingMakers mythology. This is the true identity of each and every human being. In this model of the sovereign integral, We are gods of our local multiverse, and collectively, we are first source in the multiverse. Why is GSSC the anchor of separation? We have two paths, religion and spirituality, each being different sides of the same coin, and this coin is GSSC. Now, Anu, being the intelligent, clever entity that he is, knew that humans would evolve, and in this evolution they may begin to remember that they are sovereign integrals. Bear in mind that the Atlanteans were highly evolved beings before they donned the human instrument of Anu's creation. Also remember that the human instrument is not simply the physical body but includes the emotions and HMS, and that this human instrument is componentized so that while the physical body dies, a higher dimensional body or sheath that is based on the physical body carries on. Some refer to this as the soul, others refer to it as the astral body, but it is simply a sheath for the sovereign integral to operate within, and it remains subject to the HMS and most of its programming. Thus, even upon death, the sovereign integral is not released from the influences of the HMS or the human instrument's programs. The Anunnaki created the HMS in order to consign the sovereign integral, the true self that is infinite and eternal, into a prison of conjured illusions and deceptions. So the human instrument was fitted with HMS, and the sovereign integral was placed within it as the life force, that which powered the human instrument. An aspect of GSSC was the program we call the fear of death, the fear of separation, the fear of non-existence. It was this fear, so powerfully felt by humans, that gave rise to the construct of a separate God, from which a separate spirit filled the universe, and from which we were all created in separation. Whether one arrives to God through religion or spirituality does not matter. It is the same effect of appeasing the fear of death within the individual, just as the program specified. In effect, Anu, the king of Anunnaki, positioned himself to be God of the human world. The pathway to God, independent of the religious or spiritual path one walked, had the same program underlying it. You are a human with a soul. This soul must be redeemed or activated, upon which you will be saved. In this process of being saved, you are relinquished of self-responsibility to the world condition. You are rewarded with a life eternal in the kingdom of God, by whatever name you call God, where you can live in bliss and or serve as a teacher of the light. The savior/master construct is an integral part of the GSSC and encourages human beings to yearn for a master to teach them how to ascend, how to be saved, how to achieve nirvana, how to live a moral life, and how to ensure eternal happiness. There are masters of great wisdom and light who remain within the domain of the HMS without knowing their involvement. The subtlety is so powerful that even when you feel you have achieved self-realization, you remain trapped in the HS. It is that vast, especially when compared to the material world. Saviors can take on the form of many things, including the second coming of Christ, a wrathful God, the earth, nature spirits, angelic hosts, prophecy, and extraterrestrial forces who will intercede on humanity's behalf. Each of us is our own and only savior, our only master, who can truly cause us to stand up within ourselves and shut down the suppression systems and awaken to our sovereign integral consciousness. This is the liberation path, and this will be discussed in answers that follow. In essence, GSSC is an aspect of HMS that perpetuates separation. Just as different languages separate, different religious and spiritual pathways separate the human family and make possible a race that is more easily controlled and pacified through the GSSC. Death Stress Implant Network Detour, ZIND. As its long title suggests, ZIND is the descent into humanness and the tether of custody to the material world. Within the solar plexus region of the human instrument is the ZIND module of HMS. This gets a little complicated because you have to look at HMS as the master network, and then there are nodes or implants that plug into HMS. One of these is ZIND, and while it is anchored in the solar plexus, it is an intricate network that develops exponentially upward into the heart, neck, and head regions. This is an etheric structure that collects, absorbs, and distributes fear, anxiety, stress, and restlessness. While the fear of the future dominates this module, from a programming perspective, Anu is careful to connect it to the primal fear of death and non-existence. ZIND creates much of the dysfunction in the human family in terms of its behavioral deficiencies. It also activates humans for service in religion and spirituality paths. Polarity System, PS. This is a subnode of ZIND designed to create polarities in the HMS and thus create friction between the polarities, and from this friction manifest discord and disharmony. If you exist in HMS, and you do, then you exist in polarity. It is truly that simple. Polarity is what activates and feeds the HMS. It is the food of HMS because in polarity the human instrument is lost in separation, which is precisely the point of HMS as intended by its designers. Genetic Manipulation System. This system was an outgrowth of various interdimensional races working to create a suitable instrument for accessing the physical world. It was Anu who specifically wanted not only to access the physical world in order to exploit its resources, but to do so by suppressing the infinite beings that would power the human instruments, so he had the equivalent of willing slaves. Yes, infinite beings can be suppressed into finite beings when they are subjected to HMS. In the course of engineering the human instrument, It was decided to create GMS as a means to modify the human instrument over time, as it evolved, to ensure it would never achieve self-realization or the sovereign integral state of awareness. The state of Satori, Nirvana, cosmic consciousness, enlightenment, and rapture were all different names for heightened states within the GSSC, which was still within the HMS domain, but these became checkpoints that triggered GMS interventions. The true state of the sovereign integral, even after death of the human instrument, was never realized by a member of the human family until very recently. Wholeness Navigator. This is the element of HMS that activates the individual's authentic search for God in the context of wholeness, oneness, unity, and equality. Some people undertake this search because they feel an obligation to do this as a means to appease the expectations of their parents, spouse, or their own sense of guilt. The authentic search, as decreed by the Wholeness Navigator, is a recent bypass that has been brought into the human instrument through GMS, which is an open system. While it is still an artifact of the HMS, it is a backdoor into the liberation path. More about this later. Post-death system, PDS. This is the system where the individual, upon death of their physical body, is greeted by guides on the other side and review their life experience, confronting those areas of deficiency and returning to right the wrongs of their previous life. In other words, karma and reincarnation. The PDS is the means by which the sovereign integral remains in the grip of illusion, even though the illusion is a heightened reality when compared to physical existence on the earth plane. It enables the recycling of the sovereign integral into physical dimensions over and over again. This process was initially conceived of as the principal means through which the world would be prepared for Anu to be born into the earth plane and reign upon earth as the undisputed world leader. However, that eventuality has been removed as a scenario. These 9 components constitute the prison complex that every human being is subjected to when they are born, live, and die, no matter how many cycles of birth and death they may undergo. With the suppression of the sovereign integral, we are all living in a matrix-like world of illusion and deception. While human beings are no longer in service to the Anunnaki for the production of gold, the genetic carryover of the HMS and the other components of the suppression framework are nonetheless still in operation, and the reins of these suppression systems have been turned over to, and greedily grabbed by, the elite. It is well past the hour that humans wake up to what they are participating in and learn how they can stop it, one individual at a time. We are the key to our dilemma, and we must learn how to deactivate the suppression matrix so we can awaken to the sovereign integral consciousness, live within its behavioral intelligence, and release ourselves from the grip of the mind and human instrument. Those who extol hope and light, I can only say that you will be disappointed if your hope is contingent on anyone, save yourself, to facilitate change in this world. It is truly as Gandhi explained, we must become the change we want to see in the world, but the key is to define what change. Have you ever considered the definition of yourself? What is it that defines you? If you look in the mirror and peel away the masks, the pretensions, the deceptions, the fears, the thoughts, the feelings, what remains? For most, they would answer their soul or spirit. And if I told you that the soul, as most define it, does not truly exist apart from the mind, what would you say? The change I want to see in the world is that people begin to see themselves as multidimensional beings whose core is the sovereign integral that is the distillation of first source in a singular, human expression. If people were only in tune with this frequency, they would understand that all is united in oneness, equality, and truth. This is the definition of the Grand Portal as it has been disclosed by the WingMakers mythology for the past 10 years. Each individual is a portal unto themselves, and this portal is the access point to the interdimensional worlds of the sovereign integral, where the human instrument, like a spacesuit, is finally removed and the individual realizes their true, infinite nature. And in this realization, understands that everyone is equal in this state, and in this equality we are one. The Grand Portal is when humanity stands up as one being to this all-encompassing realization, and then we transcend the suppression framework and express as sovereigns. 2012 is a single page in the book called The Era of Transparency and Expansion. The life of deception, the era of veils over veils over veils, is dissipating, provided enough people rise up within themselves and honor the sovereign integral within by expressing its truth. But to do this, people must become attuned to its consciousness apart from the HMS, and this is the course of action that people must engage in. The seeking of information is over. The seeking of a master, guru, religion, spiritual path, or way shower is over. The seeking of objects of blame is over. The seeking of hidden information behind the dark forces is over. It is the expression of the sovereign integral consciousness and the deactivation of the suppression framework that becomes the focus of each individual in this new era. Project Camelot, question 3. My own view is that our planet is a conscious being and the planet and humanity is moving from the 3rd density into the 4th to the 5th in the coming years. My understanding is that we have entered the 4th density at the present time. According to the RA material, not all of humanity will move into the 5th density, but will remain in a 3rd density Earth out of choice and due to their emphasis on service to self versus service to others. How do you view this? If your view is different, would you please go into some detail on what you see? James, answer 3. Earth, as a consciousness, is indefinable. The moment you bring in a description of Earth's consciousness, you define it, and the moment you define it, you frame it in separation, and the moment you separate it into elements, you deceive its true essence. Earth is a host consciousness, and this is its essence, though even that creates separation, and therefore a degree of deception. Yes, the densities are shifting, but these are artifacts of the human mind system, HMS. Even the belief that the near-infinite dimensions of the astral and mental planes are real is a comparison to the physical plane. I would suggest to you that what is in the purview of the human instrument, which includes the physical, emotional, astral, and mental densities or dimensions, are all caught up in the HMS and suppression framework. It is not of the sovereign integral, and it is therefore impermanent, existing in polarity, separation, and deception. In other words, it is a creation designed to conceal what you truly are. The Earth is not shifting to a new dimension in order to raise its consciousness and ascend to a higher state. Nor are the fortunate few going to be swept along because they did something better than others, and therefore they are the chosen. We, as a human family, are being prepared to live as sovereign integrals upon Earth. Will this happen in 2012? No. 2012 will feel like any other year for most people. There is no year or specific time that will define the era of transparency and expansion, the rise of the sovereign integral. It is happening quietly in the most unexpected places. People are beginning to see that what has been encoded within their human instrument is a system of control, deception, and manipulation. And at some deeper level, they glimpse a new clarity, as fleeting as it might be. They perceive themselves to be more than a system of feelings and thoughts packaged inside a body. This is what is to come, people awakening from a virtual reality inside a virtual reality. Earth is part of this new transparency. Nature has already donned this new apparel and wears it proudly, but humans have not noticed, for our programs lack the perception. It will be, in part, through nature that the human family will be awakened, and Earth is preparing for this eventuality. When it occurs, it is not because Earth is vengeful or God, working through Earth, is delivering his wrath. It is Earth/nature expressing its new transparency and expansion in its own way. Consider the following story. Advanced humans, living on an interdimensional level, were cleverly induced to embody human instruments designed by a foreign intelligence, the Anunnaki. As this workforce was developed, the physically embodied humans became utterly accepting of their limitation because it was systematic in suppressing the sovereign integral consciousness, the infinite and eternal life force that powered their human vessels. Early on, human bloodlines intermixed with their designers, and the human evolutionary pathway into diversity was accelerated. Part of this diversity was contained within the elite societies that helped to formulate the separation of the human family in the money power grid. The designer gods, the Anunnaki, were ultimately satisfied with their mining operations and left Earth and their human creation behind. The human genome was adaptive within the matrix of the human mind system, HMS, and evolved into the present-day human family we have in the early 21st century. So now we have a race of beings that are trapped inside a suppression framework, unknowing of their condition, worshipping gods that do not exist, believing in heavens and hells that are part of the HMS landscape, praying to masters and saviors to absolve their sins and moral apathy, and continuing to fear death and non-existence as if they were absolutely unaware of their true nature. Let's say that you are the true God, first source. What would you do to awaken people to their true nature? What process would you use to shift the human family to a perspective of realization that what they had believed in was of deception and suppression of their true natures, knowing that the components of the suppression framework could not be removed overnight or the individual would likely go crazy or, worse yet, perish? What would you do? First Source has limited moves on the chessboard because humanity is sealed inside a prison where the guards and warden of the prison control the money system and hold and distribute the power among themselves. The spiritual and religious leaders are equally caught up in the prison, occupying the more righteous sections, but still within the same prison. The interdimensional beings like ascended masters and angels are also imprisoned, though their freedoms seem near infinite when compared to the human inmates. There are a handful of humans who have removed the HMS and its assorted systems of separation and broken out of the prison, but these are an infinitesimally small percentage, and generally their writings, stories, techniques are received as crazy talk by their fellow inmates. And even if a handful of humans escape the prison sends its guards to recapture them or discredit them in such a way as to render their deeds as supernatural or, worse yet, demonic. The real problem in this story is that the humans within the prison do not see the prison as a prison or the guards as guards. They are oblivious to their imprisonment. Thus, they are not trying to escape from the prison. Rather, if they are seeking to escape from anything, it is from boredom, anxiety, poverty, pain, bad relationships, illness, depression, and hopelessness. The suppression of their identity as a sovereign integral that lives in eternal and unconditional oneness, equality, and truthfulness is not even a consideration in their search. Earth, consisting of the animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms as well as the elements of air, water, and fire, combined with nature as defined by the cosmos, is the queen on the chessboard that First Source can use. These are strategic instruments through which specific walls of the prison will be destroyed, and individuals who are properly prepared can reclaim their identities as sovereign integrals and establish a new transparency and expansion within their wholeness. Now, just because some walls of the prison will be taken down does not mean that everyone will run out and embody their new freedoms. The prison is constructed of many walls, and when one wall falls down, there is the initial rush of relative freedom, but there remains another wall and another wall after that. The prison is a labyrinth, and until the individual is not relying on pictures, images, sounds, words, feelings, and thoughts to interpret their world, they remain inside a wall of the prison I have previously described as the suppression framework of the sovereign integral. Many will not feel comfortable with the spatial qualities and long horizons of this new era. They will resist the transparency and expansion because they have come to identify so strongly with their HMS that anything that tears at that identity threatens what they perceive as their hold on existence. Others, who are prepared, will easily embody this new era and transition into it like a baby eagle taking its first flight, a little awkward at first, but quickly mastering the required skills. While Earth and universe nature play key roles in the liberation maneuver, the preparation of the individual is their own responsibility. It is a balanced equation. Earth/nature plus individual preparation equals sovereign integral realization. The first point of process is the key factor of preparation. If your first point for the reclamation of the sovereign integral state of consciousness is anything less than unconditional oneness, equality, and truthfulness in the expression of every moment, then you will hit many walls within the prison, and each time you do, you will be required to start over. Thus, the initial point of self-realization must be aligned to the realization itself. This is due to the mathematical equations that guide the process. Project Camelot, question 4. What is your understanding of coming events in the next few years up to and beyond 2012? We have many whistleblowers, experiencers, and futurists conveying visions of future events that may include A. A magnetic pole reversal. B. A physical pole shift. C. A CME, coronal mass ejection. D. All of the above, possibly exacerbated by the close approach of Nibiru to Earth. Can you comment on the above scenarios? Do you have reason to believe that any of these may occur? James, answer 4. Let me be clear, the universe we are in its entire physical splendor and stature, is part of the prison I defined in the previous question. I realize the term prison carries a negative meaning, but if there is furniture within a prison, do you say the furniture is evil or negative? No, it is just furniture that happens to be inside a prison. So it is with the planets and stars and the universe as a whole. Therefore, each of the phenomena that our senses perceive, whether it is pole shift or a 9.0 earthquake, remain inside the human mind system, HMS. Phenomenon is deception. Everyone wants a vision and struggles to see the other side, not realizing that these features, images, and sounds are more of the HMS, just a more subtle rendering of the prison walls in the outer reaches of the labyrinth. I think in my previous answer, question 3, you can see that I believe Earth/nature are the primary catalysts that First Source is orchestrating to support humanity's realization of itself as sovereign integrals. Thus, it will feel as if Earth and the entire universe is compressing in upon the individual, tightening its grip around your very being. This compression is the very tool that is being deployed by First Source to help activate you. Relative to Nibiru, it is not a factor. In a sense, it has been removed from the equation of the sovereign integral for a complex set of reasons I won't go into here. Project Camelot, question 5. We are getting various reports from whistleblowers about a dark agenda of the Illuminati that includes A. A crash or end of the dollar and 1930s-like conditions in the US. B. Martial law and possible herding of people into prison camps. C. Spread of viruses around the world aimed at reducing 2/3 RDS of the population. D. Microchipped population and increased electronic surveillance, thereby curtailing freedom still further. While we have conflicting testimony about all of the above, it seems clear that some of the above may already have begun. Can you comment on the above scenarios? Do you have reason to believe that any of these may occur? James, answer 5. The global systems of our planet can be thought of collectively as a being composed of organs like the heart, brain, liver, etc. The global systems are banking, government, military, religious, educational, food production, energy, transportation, and commerce, and each of these is an organ in the body of the collective human mind system reality, or, simplified, the collective system, CS. Each of these 9 global systems is an organ that depends on the blood cells to keep it alive, to circulate the nutritional ingredients within the larger body, and human beings are the blood cells, and money is the breath that brings the oxygen to the CS. This is the body of the collective HMS existence, and it is precisely this that humans animate and make possible through their own survival programs and the exchange of money. The collective system is the aggregate of the global systems, the human beings, and the money. This constitutes one system. Though it may seem unwieldy and impossible to control, it is quite controllable to those whose hands hold the reins and control the vital organ, the brain. The brain of the CS is the banking system. It operates on the first point paradigm that life is money and money is life. It is the origin of human existence that money is life, and in this single thought form humanity has evolved, distilling its ancient memories in our present-day banking system. The collective system interacts with HMS and creates the primary walls within the HMS prison spoken of in question 4. The collective system body is failing, and it is failing because the new era of transparency and expansion is underway. These forces of CS and the era of transparency and expansion are colliding in our time, and for the sovereign integral consciousness to manifest in this physical field, the collective system must change to accommodate it, as they are like oil and water and cannot mix. Thus, those who hold the reins of the collective system have great fear that something is amiss. Something is happening in the world that portends great change, and change is not something they embrace. In the face of change, which to them is a lessening of power, they will undertake nefarious plans to keep the population distracted, uneasy, nervous, uncertain, ignorant, overburdened with technology, attentive to fear, and disempowered. All of the items and more that you list in your question are in various stages of planning. That is not to say they will be successful in launching them, but they're being planned, and even in the contemplation of these plans you can see the sinister nature that has overtaken elements of the human family. The collective system will fall. It must fall. The organs will shut down, and the body will die. This will take time. It will be a process that will take many years, which will thankfully provide a transition stage, so humans can adapt to the new body that is being built to support and sustain the new sovereign integral consciousness as it, the origin of us, becomes known as us in this world. As each of us deprogram ourselves and deactivate our HMS, there is a corollary access to the sovereign integral, and in this access, we create the best opportunity we have of defeating the dark agendas that exist on Earth, as well as easing the transition between the deteriorating collective system body of today and the new one that will replace it. Project Camelot, question 6. Please address how people can best prepare for the coming changes regardless of where they are on the spectrum of awareness at this time. Our view is that although there are preparations that can be made in the physical reality, a safe place is only a reflection of the consciousness of those who are gathered there, and no one location may necessarily be better than anywhere else, depending on the path each has chosen for experiencing these times. James, answer 6. This is a complex question to answer because it truly depends on the individual, but the universal support system for each of us is our breath. It is the breath that connects us to our point of origin, and when I use that term I don't mean birth in the physical, this life, or any other. I am referring to the sovereign integral state of consciousness that is our pure state of being. Breath is the way in which the human instrument connects to this origin point anywhere in space-time. Breath is the portal between the physical dimension and the quantum or interdimensional domains, but it is not the normal, autonomic breathing. Rather, it is a very specific breathing pattern that we call quantum pause. Quantum pause is a simple, 4-stage process beginning with an in-breath of anywhere between 3 and 6 counts, depending on your lung capacity, posture, and degree of privacy. After you have gathered in your breath, breathing through your nose, you hold it, pause for an equal count, and then exhale through your mouth, again for the same count, and then hold, pause for the same count. The breath pattern is described below using an example of a 4 count. The key is to maintain symmetry in each of the 4 segments of the process. If you are using a 3 count, apply it equally in each segment. It is not essential that you monitor this with precision. Instead, apply a casual monitoring of your time for each segment and keep a consistency to the flow. 1 cycle is described above, and it is recommended to do 3 to 4 cycles in a row, and then return to normal breathing. This normal breathing period is called the consolidation period. Keep your eyes closed throughout the process and sit with your back straight in a comfortable position, both feet on the ground. When you begin your consolidation period, it is a time for you to bring focus and all of your attention to those things that bubble to the surface of your consciousness, knowing that these arise for a reason. This is an excellent time to apply the 6 heart virtues: appreciation, compassion, forgiveness, humility, valor, and understanding to any thought or feeling that manifests. This consolidation period usually lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, but there are no set time limits. Use your intuition to guide this period of time. Generally, each repetition of the consolidation, and usually there are 4 or 5, becomes less crowded with thoughts or feelings, and by the time you enter the final consolidation period, you have emptied yourself of thoughts and feelings and entered the quantum domain. The diagram below depicts a typical session of quantum pause. Notice there are 3 cycles of the breath, and then a consolidation period in this particular example. This repeats 4 times. You can have as many as 5 cycles of breath interspersed with consolidation periods. Again, symmetry is important. The application of quantum pause may seem an unlikely way to deactivate the suppression framework of the sovereign integral and more effectively handle the transition stage we are in, but I would encourage you to try it for 3 weeks and see what results you achieve. Only through your own experience can you judge the merit of quantum pause. If, after 3 weeks of daily practice, you experience a new clarity and connection to your origin point, then you will be motivated to continue, and in this decision you have established your new first point upon which unconditional oneness, equality, and truthfulness can stand. There are many nuances to the quantum pause technique, and I would encourage you to discover them on your own, in your own way. This is but a basic technique that I've shared with you, but there are subtleties to this technique that are powerful enhancements, and these will occur to you while you're in the process of using the technique, so remain open while you practice it. Some quick suggestions to get you started. The quantum pause immediately after the out-breath can provide a subtle sense of panic for some people. If this occurs, shorten your count so you have less time elapsed for each segment. For example, if you are using a 4-count cycle, shorten it to 3. This feeling of panic will go away as you practice the technique. These hitches or quantum pauses have a purpose that you will come to understand. I would also suggest that you focus your attention on your breath, its sound, its texture, how it feels inside your lungs, how your lips form in the out-breath, how it flows through your system, etc. This focus aligns you with first point or the origin point of your sovereign integral, because it is the breath that is the portal of the infinite and eternal being that you truly are, and it is through this portal that it is manifesting in physicality. When using quantum pause, there's a natural tendency to look for the experience of light or to see new dimensions, speak with beings or even God, or have a wow experience that really confirms that you're on the right path. The practice of quantum pause will bring you new experiences and awareness, but leave your expectations behind. Again, human beings love visual stimuli. They love to see higher dimensions, as if seeing is believing. But all that is in the quantum space-time does not conform to the human mind system. Quantum is origin. It is metaphysical, which precedes visual, acoustic, and sensory data. It precedes feelings and thoughts. It exists before these stimuli, and is indeed hidden behind them, to some extent. The wow experience may manifest in a form that your HMS cannot interpret or translate into images, words, feelings, and thoughts. Therefore, do your best to eliminate expectations of an experiential nature, and simply follow your breath. The moment that the sovereign integral reaches into your HMS and announces its presence, you will never forget, nor will you mistake it for anything other than what it is. And when that time comes, you might be brushing your teeth, writing an email, or resting on the couch. It happens in its own time. In addition to the practice of quantum pause, I would suggest that you consider new paradigms for your way of life. For example, I have disclosed the 6 heart virtues, a free PDF download, in some detail on the eventtemples.org website. This practical orientation helps you move through life with greater harmony. You might also find value in the practice of the quantum moment. The quantum moment is dissecting your day into passages of time. In other words, moments, in this definition, are passages of time or events. For example, let's say you get out of bed in the morning. You are now starting a new passage or quantum moment. Before you move into the new passage, you practice an abbreviated quantum pause, 1 or 2 breath cycles. In-breath, quantum pause, out-breath, quantum pause. This reestablishes your first point, grounding your physical-based human instrument in the quantum domain. As you go through the passage of waking up, washing your face, brushing your teeth, etc., you are stepping through passages of time. The quantum moment, as its first point, perceives that the individual is sovereign and infinite, and exists here, right here. It is not flying about on the soul planes. It is not hidden in the robes of a god or master. It is not separate from your human instrument, and it does not avoid the human condition. It is, and always will be, right here. As previously said, the quantum moment is a passage of time that feels like a portal is stepped through, and you enter a portal of experience different than the previous passage. They can be simple, like walking from your car to your workstation at the office. That's a moment, and the next moment the phone rings and you transition to the new moment of talking with someone. Your entire life is a series of moments or passages of time, and in each passage you are accompanied by your infinite self that is seeking one thing on this earth, self-realization of itself within the human instrument. In our world, information and knowledge is dispensed like fire hydrants uncapped, exploding in every direction. Everyone is telling you the way to truth is this way or that way, and the way leads into separation and therefore deception. While you are in the quantum moment, you see the fork in the road is always one of 2 ways: truth or dishonesty. Truth is the breath of life issuing from the sovereign integral. Dishonesty is the human mind system parroting the knowledge and information that is ricocheting in every corner of our lives via cell phones, television, books, seminars, movies, podcasts, e-papers, websites, newspapers, and human relations. To realize the self as the sovereign integral here and express this consciousness while in the human instrument requires that you focus the 6 heart virtues within your local universe, the passages of your life in which you physically move, and apply them ceaselessly. The key to realization is a direct, sober, truthful assessment of your behaviors and applying the 6 heart virtues to those behaviors that have become expressions of your self-deception and dishonesty. The quantum moment helps you to be present in the moment and to see yourself as the observer, not passing judgment on others or yourself, but retaining the sober assessment of the sovereign integral and applying forgiveness and understanding to the passage in which you most recently entered throughout your life. It becomes a way of life. Project Camelot, question 7. Please address the subject of ascension from your point of view, or that of those you are speaking for. What exactly is ascension? How would you recommend that people view it and accommodate it in their spiritual awareness? James, answer 7. To understand ascension, it is necessary to understand its origins. The concept of ascension arose out of division and disconnection. Religion conceived that Source or God was outside the self, living in some remote dimension of space, fully separated from the human condition. Human beings were not really worthy of God, but religion, in its self-enlightened state, gave humans the concept of faith. By having faith, God will come down and save you from the human condition, provided, of course, that you have faith and apply His commandments. Ascension came along, not so much from religion, but rather spiritual mystic sources, and posited that humans did not need to be passive in the application of faith, but rather they could ascend to the source. In other words, instead of waiting for God to come to you, you could go to God. Humans, under the proper tutelage of masters, could learn how to ascend and attain the godhood and become a master of their own, serving God and His universe as an emissary of the light. Religion and spirituality really had the same idea. The only difference was that religion used passive faith, while spirituality used active practices. The first point of ascension is the yearning for a source outside the self, hence division and disconnection. Any first point that begins in separation is pulled into the human mind system's gravitational field and is lost in the deceptions therein. Thus, ascension is not an aspect of the sovereign integral state. As written in my previous answer, you are here and always have been and always will be. There is nowhere to go outside of yourself to find yourself or God or light or enlightenment or ascension. Look at it this way. If you are self-contained, if the sovereign integral is indeed within you at all times, then where exactly do you need to ascend? It is realization, not ascension. And realization has, as its first point, the unconditional oneness, equality, and truthfulness of self in all life expressions. While ascension's first point is, I am not equal to my source. My source is outside of me. Therefore, I need to ascend to it in order to become a greater being more worthy of love and light. Ascension is of the teacher-student ordering of the universe, residing within HS. It defines the subtle aspects of self-deception that are caught up in the spiritual belief systems of Earth and the interdimensional planes as well. If you believe you are in the process of ascending, ask yourself the questions: where I am ascending to? How do I know that that endpoint is not of the human mind system? Are my mental pictures of ascension based on my own experience, or have they been downloaded from the information and knowledge systems of humanity? In other words, the unconscious domain? All of the energy, efforts, attention, and learning that are placed on the ascension process are a diversion from your own realization of the sovereign integral. It is as if you have pursued a shadow in favor of the substance. The ascension pathway is ensconced in the comforts of gurus and masters, both physical and interdimensional, that supposedly support your journey into the light and love of God. Along this journey, you see how it absolves you of responsibility related to this world's real conditions of hunger, inequality, rape, war, abuse, servitude, illness, racism, and 100 other maladies. The absolution comes in the form of your journey itself. The diversion, the separation. Realization of the sovereign integral consciousness is realization of one's true self as present in everyone else. You see the condition of the human family as your own, and your condition as one with everyone else. You are in the moment, engaged in the dismantling of the HMS, knowing that as you do this, you are invoking the sovereign integral consciousness to manifest on Earth in a human instrument where there is complete and unconditional transparency, and therefore expansion. Project Camelot, Question 8. Regarding the race of beings you consider yourself to be speaking for and are representative of, and here I must admit I consider myself as a member of this group, but for the sake of our viewers, please answer briefly if you would, the following for those who may not know the WingMakers material. What planet and or time are they from? Do they have a physical presence here? What is your own current mission here on Earth? Have they contacted or communicated with other humans as they have done yourself? James, answer 8. It has been almost exactly 10 years since the WingMakers.com website was first launched on the web. The first materials were designed to activate certain people to the sovereign integral consciousness. This consciousness cannot be contained in the historical context of soul, atma, spirit, or anima. It needed to be redefined because the soul construct was part of the God, spirit, soul complex as defined in Question 1, and therefore was part of the human mind system. Very few people realize this consciously. In effect, for the past 10 years, the sovereign integral was introduced tepidly and allowed to simmer on the back burner of the WingMakers and Lyricus websites. In this new era of transparency, the sovereign integral will be elevated to a new level of vividness and accessibility. Those of us involved in the WingMakers and Lyricus are focused on introducing the sovereign integral state of consciousness and providing support to those interested in realizing this consciousness as their self. We believe that the human family is programmed to believe what it is fed via the information and knowledge systems of the world, and that these systems stimulate and excite the human mind system, ensuring that the individual becomes lost in division and disconnection. In terms of where the WingMakers derive from, it is not important. We are you, and you are us. That is all. The manifested world of Earth and humanity and all of nature is one layer of the onion. There is also an interdimensional domain that is composed of innumerable layers, and within these layers reside life forms within life forms within life forms. Its complexity and breadth is not translatable into human language. The beings that exist in the manifested, three-dimensional universe are human and only human. The beings that exist within the other layers are interdimensional beings that are not manifested in the physical domain, but all of the beings, whether human/physical or non-human/interdimensional, are part of the sovereign integral consciousness. Now, I'm well aware that this disclosure, for many people, stretches their HMS to the point of discomfort and apprehension. The HMS cannot grapple easily with these concepts as they are outside of its patterns of conception, but all you have to do is practice the quantum pause, apply the 6 heart virtues in your local universe, and observe through the eyes of the sovereign integral, the quantum presence that is deep within you, that has no programming, no agenda, no deception, no purpose. It is simply itself, expressing oneness, equality, and truthfulness unconditionally in every breath. Project Camelot, question 9. If you have any information regarding the various differing agendas of the main races of beings that are monitoring, assisting, interacting with, taking advantage of, or manipulating the situation here on Earth, please address this to the best of your ability. James, answer 9. As you may have surmised in my previous answer, the number of beings in existence is infinite, and yet, if you read carefully, I did say that humans are the only three-dimensionally manifested beings in the universe. Those beings that are non-human can operate within the three-dimensional manifest world, but generally their bodies are not well suited to our density, and they will perish if they don't return to their native dimension. The agenda of those who are the prison guards is focused on one thing: to conceal the view of the prison walls through directing the attention of the human mind system into entertainment venues that stimulate their senses. Those who are susceptible to this diversion go about their lives completely unaware that they are bumping into the prison walls in every moment of their life. Those who have a different resonance, whose wholeness navigator has been awakened, and they are led by it, they are all about deepening their perceptions of the prison walls. They are sensing the walls in their every waking moment. In doing this, they do not fear the walls, they do not fear the guards, and they do not fear those whom the guards serve. Their process of realization is sensing the prison walls in every breath so they can dismantle them brick by brick. The beings inside the prison are both human and interdimensional. The prison is of the physical and interdimensional worlds. It encompasses both. It is not as if humans are in the prison, and then upon death they break out and go directly to an enlightened state enjoying the fruits of heaven. No, the consciousness that you express in this world will accompany you into the next dimension. A human is equally capable of leaving the prison as an entity in the interdimensional domain. Remember, equality and oneness is not a condition of environment or vibratory domain. Project Camelot, question 10. Somewhat related to question 9, we have some evidence of a conflict currently going on between two factions of the Anunnaki, as well as between the Nordics and Greys/Reptilians, which includes the Illuminati and various governments that may have become aligned through treaties with either one side or the other, and the sovereignty of the Earth. Can you comment? James, answer 10. Alignment is formed only within the hidden elite. The hidden elite is the incunabula. The elite operate in the following general alignment: incunabula, banking system; Illuminati, secret societies; world government leaders. The incunabula control the banking system, and those that turn the dials are cleverly hidden. Down through time, the banking system is the force through which all other organizations and objectives are controlled, attenuated, destroyed, or allowed to thrive. It is the alpha power of the collective system, and thus it was important, if not necessary, for the incunabula to remain hidden. The incunabula was designed originally to prepare the human domain for the return of Anu, the Anunnaki king who originally designed and co-created the human species. Part of the myth surrounding the return of Christ was associated with this expectation, as it was whispered into the religious doctrine by those who knew of the true extent of the second coming. However, Anu is not coming because the game has been changed within the dimensions. The original plan was that Anu would enter our world several years prior to 2012, which would provide him time to prepare his staff, the incunabula, for the end of time, or what has been referred to in the popular media as 2012. The end of time was construed to be the end of the human programmed existence, the demise of the human mind system, the crashing down of the prison walls that have deceived humankind from realizing its true nature as sovereign integrals. The end of time will be very much like a strong wind that passes over a calm sea, and only those boats who have their sails unfurled and are prepared will notice the effects of the wind. Others will be so distracted, so fearful, that they do not even notice the wind, or if they do, it will not occur to them that it is unveiling a new direction, a new shore, a new way of expressing life. Because the elite are focused on the money power grid, they see the end of time as the end of their power. Amid this perception, they are scrambling for position, seeking to form new relationships that may enable their era to continue unimpeded, or at least if the money power grid will consolidate, they want to be among the survivors. Thus, there is great infighting and posturing among the elite. There are many interpretations about the end of time, and as I alluded in my previous comments, it will be quite different for those who are prepared compared to those who are infused with the human mind system and are completely comfortable and identified with the prison it represents. For those, the end of time will feel like the program has a virus or bug. It will feel like the universe is glitched and they're being sucked into the disorder. It will be very frightening for some. The elite, and this includes their interdimensional allies, realize the end result of the human program is an unknown. It is not understood. Its implication to the money power grid, the lifeline that perpetuates their control, is uncertain, but they know change is afoot and that this change is of a magnitude that will surpass historical standards. Project Camelot, question 11. Please address the role of channeling versus the information received by remote viewers and the role of prophecy in our movement into the future. Please also address the role of Mayan, Hopi, and other First Nation, e.g. Aboriginal, prophecies and how accurate or pertinent they may be in revealing or informing the future. James, answer 11. Channeling is a subcomponent of the God-Spirit-Soul complex, GSSC, and therefore the human mind system. The origins of channeling arise from Anu's attempt to automate his persona into the human domain because he realized that the access between the dimensions and the manifest environment of humanity would close. The GSSC was his automation system that embodied his presence within the world of man. Channeling was originally the equivalent of demon possession, where interdimensional entities would temporarily infuse themselves within the human instrument and read a script prepared for them, usually an operative of the GSSC who is intent on bringing hope, love, truth, wisdom, and cosmological indoctrinations to humanity through the spiritual and, to a lesser extent, religious systems of the human family. In more recent times, channeling has become more automated, using pre-programmed scripts, voice tonalities, gestures, and accents which are implanted in the HMS of the individual channeler and quite literally broadcast for later publication and dissemination among those who have a resonance to GSSC and seek enlightenment therein. The channel materials, owning to their extensive crafting, were cosmological wunderkinds that generated awe and near-instant faith in their readers. Works like the Urantia book, Conversations with God, Seth, Agartha, Alice Bailey, and countless others were all prepared texts for humanity, written by dimensional entities under the direction of the GSSC and distributed for human consumption to ensure that humans remain satiated with division and deception, though under the guise of spiritual and cosmological truth. If you carefully examine channeling, you will see that it does not mention the sovereign integral, the silence that is you. They discuss the heavens, God, angelic beings, extraterrestrial intelligences, the service orientation of ascended being, ascension process of soul, morality, practical living, alignment to God, life after death, and the complex teacher-student ordering of the universe. It is all designed to instill separation and satisfy the seeker that truth exists on the material plane. Thus, they do not have to leave the prison to find it. They simply need to read or listen with their mind. Remote viewing is tapping into the unconscious or unified field of the human mind system. Within this field of consciousness, remote viewers can access the astral imprint of Earth or any other planet or system in which the HMS extends, which is the entire known physical universe. The astral imprint is like a reflection in a grainy mirror. It lacks the texture and details, but the general picture exists. It is time-sensitive, so sometimes unbeknownst to the remote viewer, the subject is time-shifted, and the time shift can be thousands of years. Remote viewers also can be influenced by more subtle dimensional fields that are not physically manifest. Thus, sometimes their imagery is not of this world, though it seems of the physical, three-dimensional world. It is really of the astral or mental. As for prophecy, the Mayans in particular were very advanced because they had specific priests that were offspring of human and Anunnaki genetic intermixing, and this allowed them to understand the higher-order mathematics of the human mind system. The HMS is a mathematical composite equation at its foundation level. I realize that this may not seem possible, and your belief or disbelief is not important. All I will explain is that for prophecy to work, predestination must be existent, and if predestination exists, then mathematics would seem a likely reason, would it not? In terms of prophecy, there are only two themes of importance. One prophecy relates to the Grand Portal, as it is known within WingMakers, and the other to the end of time. The end of time prophecy is attributed to the Mayan, but as I suggested earlier, there was an Anunnaki influence to the prophecy that was due to the genetic intermixing of the two races, which is another story altogether. The end of time prophecy was actually initiated in Atlantean times. There was an individual among the Atlantean leadership that possessed a penetrating knowledge of prophecy, so much so that even Anu was aware of this being. I will call this individual Cogniti, and it was he who was able to perceive and, more importantly, recall and articulate the prophecy of the end of time. This prophecy was described to Anu, and it was the galvanizing vision that caused Anu to seal heaven from earth. Cogniti's prophecy was that there would be an individual in the far distant future that would open the earth to the interdimensional planes. That earth could not be sealed from the heavens, as it was this individual's destiny to reclaim heaven. Anu was not pleased with this prophecy, and it inspired him to separate humans from the interdimensional planes, and instead, he created new worlds that were part of the HMS, residing as programs within the HMS, God-Spirit-Soul complex, that included constructs of reincarnation, afterlife, and the astral, mental, and soul planes. The end of time prophecy, as Cassidy described it, was a threat to Anu because of his creation. Human beings could access the dimensions. They would know they were programmed existences, veiled shadows of their true self. So it was this prophecy that begot the GSSC, and it became one of the most complex labyrinths in Anu's arsenal to enslave humanity. The second prophecy was the Grand Portal, and this has to do with not only one individual discovering the portal into the dimensions of the Sovereign Integral, but all of humanity. This is the return of humanity to its stature as the Sovereign Integral liberated of the HMS, yet still manifest on Earth in a human instrument. In short, it is the transformation of the human instrument into a tool of expression for the Sovereign Integral state of consciousness. While the Hopis and many other indigenous cultures have prophetic visions, the majority of these are programs within the HMS, either well within the prison walls or are echoes of the two main prophetic themes that resonate with the unconscious domain of the HMS I just described. Project Camelot, question 12. Our understanding is that Looking Glass and other ET-related time portal technology has a role in how the planet survives the movement into the galactic plane. Is the effort mentioned by Dan Burish of Majestic to close the man-made stargates in order to avoid a potential catastrophe an authentic effort, and will it successfully assist the smooth transition of our planet through the galactic plane? James, answer 12. The transition of the Earth is not dependent whatsoever on any savior or technology. Bear in mind that the human family, dimensional beings, Earth, nature, and universe are all unified in the tone of equality, as described in the WingMakers philosophy. This equality is precisely why separation is not real. Anything that is of separation exists in deception, or the HMS. The Earth is conducting itself in this equality, and that is all that is required. To comment on the stargates and other time-space manipulation technology only feeds the deception of separation. It is a drama of the HMS. Project Camelot, question 13. The WingMakers saga emphasizes the discovery of what could be viewed as a chakra system on the planet and the activation as creating the necessary link-up that would result in a Kundalini-type effect that would move the Earth from the third dimension into the fifth dimension and therefore out of the path of Nibiru and any potential for an invasion of an unwanted robotic race of beings. Is this still an accurate depiction of what needs to happen in order to avoid cataclysm and/or invasion? James, answer 13. Your interpretation is an interesting one, but is not accurate to the intent. Firstly, one of the 7 WingMakers sites is situated on each continent, not representative of a chakra system, but rather the realm of the symbolic that is hidden in every culture. The WingMakers mythology is a bridge from the Sovereign Integral to the human mind system, and it is designed to awaken this interest by releasing the masks of the HMS in favor of the identity of the Sovereign Integral. It is a preparation process that is different for every individual, but every individual in the human instrument is imprisoned within the HMS to varying degrees. I have always said that the WingMakers materials are encoded, and that these encodings are designed to prepare the individual to awaken to the deeper structures, outer prison walls, and help the individual ease their way into the new territory of the Sovereign Integral. The Sovereign Integral is not a realm of eternal ease, beauty, freedom, painlessness, and ultra-creature comforts. Rather, it is an awareness of how we are all one and equal with First Source, and that this makes each of us responsible for the prison and the outflow of its dysfunctional events. How can one leave the body upon death and circulate in a realm of heaven that is beautiful and inspiring while their fellow humans are left to suffer on Earth in the prison of their unsuspecting HS? Some would say this is because of karma and that these poor beings incarnated to serve in this capacity. Even if this were true, does this relinquish you from a responsibility to support and help your fellow humans? Remember, we are all one. We all exist in the tone of equality as sovereigns united as First Source. What happens to one happens to all. When I speak of those who are lost in the prison without knowing it, I am not referring only to the downtrodden, those starving in refugee camps, those with insurmountable health dilemmas, or those in abusive relationships, to name a few. No, I am referring to virtually all of humanity incarnated on Earth, and those who have moved on to the astral or mental planes and yet remain in the prison. If you are unrealized of self as the Sovereign Integral, you are somewhere within the prison, and though it is obvious, it must be said, this includes the prison guards and warden. Now, the robotic force you refer to, the Animus in the WingMakers mythology, is a symbolic representation of the dark force. They are not real, in the sense that they represent a threat to humanity now or in the future. Those who have lifted their consciousness and deepened their perceptions to the point where they can sense the Sovereign Integral and experience it, no matter how fleetingly, they are the ones who must express this new state in truthfulness and directness. It is the time of the Nunisunya, which is the messenger of stillness or emptiness. This is the ancient, encoded term for the end of imprisonment. The emptiness is the quantum presence or state in which the Sovereign Integral exists. As I mentioned in a previous answer, Nibiru is no longer a threat to Earth. Our threat is the human mind system and its self-perpetuating nature. Project Camelot, question 14. We have testimony that says that the Anunnaki are here, working with present-day governments and on our base on Mars. Do you agree? Is Nibiru a planetoid containing the negatively oriented side of the Anunnaki, and which is headed our way? James, answer 14. I agree that the Anunnaki are here, but they are not the threat. As I have previously stated, The real threat is people's indifference to re-referencing their world from the HMS to the sovereign integral. The elite, at all levels, direct the attention of humanity on those efforts that build the world according to their needs. The New World Order exists now, and the Anunnaki and their placements are well in control of it. Regardless of what name you give it, the world is indeed undergoing a new order, and there are those within the elite who are assessing the masses' awareness of these changes and their reactions to it. In order to ensure that the rebellion within the masses of humanity is manageable, the elite use the entertainment, media, religion, government, and education systems to desensitize humanity to the real issues, keeping their attentions on the trivial and unimportant, all the while monitoring their reactions to being monitored. You can argue that this is paranoia, or you can argue that people are naive and easily manipulated. If you choose either side, you have activated your polarity system. Congratulations! The issue is whether you resonate with the construct of the human mind system or the sovereign integral. If it is the latter, then allow your resonance to guide you, and, in an informal way, release your attention from those elements that reflect or constitute the HMS. Project Camelot, question 15. What do you know about the bases on the Moon and Mars and the various races, including humans, with bases there? James, answer 15. I apologize for sounding like a broken record that repeats itself. However, while I can answer your question in the affirmative that there are bases on the Moon and other planets in our solar system, many of these bases are not manifest in our human dimension. In other words, a human could be standing in front of these bases and not sense them whatsoever. This phenomenon is similar to the orbs that people photograph, but don't see with their human eyes. Similarly, the UFOs that are witnessed on cameras but are not observed with human eyes. The vast majority of extraterrestrial craft are only visible for short periods of time, if at all, because of the gravitational system on Earth pulls their crafts into our dimension, making them visible to our senses. On the Moon, these gravitational fields are not a factor. The bases were developed by other races, mostly the Anunnaki, as observation and storage sites. Project Camelot, question 16. What do you know about how successful the powers that be will be in surviving a pole shift or cataclysm in the underground bases that they have built for this purpose? James, answer 16. The underground bases that exist are not immune to the changes. If Earth/nature wants all of humanity to feel this compression of the quantum worlds with the manifest worlds, there will be no place to avoid it. Earthquakes and floods, to take two examples, can damage underground installations as well, if not better, than they can damage above ground. Those who believe they can manipulate Earth/nature without consequence will learn otherwise. To be clear, I am not suggesting that terrible Earth/nature changes are imminent or unavoidable. Rather, I am saying that no one will be immune from their effects when they occur because we are one and equal to all in existence. There are those within the elite that believe they have immunity, but they are so lost within their HMS programs that they are deluded and brainwashed into believing their actions will not rebound upon them, follow them into the next dimension, and encase them until they forgive and are forgiven. This forgiveness is not a biblical expression or a religious platitude. It is the nature of the sovereign integral to remain inaccessible until the individual in the human expression, HMS, rises up within themselves and announces to their local universe, and no more will I be part of this deception. No more will I contribute my energy to the works of deception. No more will I stand idle while others suffer. No more will I shake in my self-doubt and allow those in power to decide my fate. No longer will I be sucked into the distractions of the elite. No longer will I reserve my activism for a future time. The time is now. If you do this, not only in words but deeds, you will see a space open up in your life, a sort of emptiness and stillness that lacks human embroidery or definition. This is the place in which you can stand up and radiate the oneness, equality, and truthfulness of the sovereign integral. This is the activism that will change the world. It will not be the organizations, the sects, or the militias that bring change. They cannot stand up to the elite. Only the self, the sovereign integral, operating in harmony with Earth/nature, can stand up to the elite and usher in the era of transparency and expansion. When you voice the genuine and sober self-assessment in all of its textures and subtlety, you are inviting the new behaviors of the sovereign integral. These are all signs of authentic forgiveness. They are not the sanctimonious, over-emotionalized capitulations of a guilt-ridden follower who intones the ritual of forgiveness like a machine. In apathy, blindness, or utter devotion to the money power grid, it is all the same relative to accessing the sovereign integral state. You will be shut out. Forgiveness is the active formula of self-assessment of your present situation and the application of new behaviors that are in resonance with the sovereign integral. Look upon your life every moment and see if you are operating in the HMS or are quietly going about the business of cutting the threads that bind you. If you feel your behaviors reflect a state of oneness, equality, and truthfulness, then you are in resonance with the sovereign integral. Project Camelot, question 17. Would you consider yourself to be a time traveler, having returned in order to help guide the planet through this transition? Would you view any other great teachers or world figures from this perspective? James, answer 17. Like everyone else embodied in a human instrument, living in these times, I am both my sovereign self and I am first source. I am more aware of this state than some, but this is the only difference. I am one of those who has been exposed to life outside the prison, and I have returned not with descriptions of the other side, but with encoded works, techniques, and behavioral systems that can help people form alignments with their preternatural self and move into the new era of transparency and expansion with greater ease. Project Camelot, question 18. Our philosophy is that hiding in plain sight is wisest, or, in other words, the best place to hide is out in the open. You have chosen to remain hidden and largely anonymous. Would you explain the philosophy that lies behind this, your experience with the PTB and their surveillance of you and your work, and what circumstances or conditions might motivate you into coming forward in person in the future? James, answer 18. My anonymity is not an expression of hiding from the powers that be. I am an infinite being just as you and everyone else. My reason for anonymity is due to my desire to let the works stand on their own, without the handiwork of personality or image, as I am not an image or personality. Besides, the powers that be know who I am and how to find me if they are ever inclined to do so. My role, as single-pointed as it may seem, is to reintroduce the sovereign integral to humanity. It is an encoded word concept that has many, many layers to it. Some people will immediately resonate with the concept it contains, not really knowing why or what the word means. While it was introduced 10 years ago through the WingMakers.com website, it was only disclosed at a certain level. Now, through this communication, and those that will follow, a new layer of its meaning has been revealed. The sovereign integral is the transparent being of expansion, uniquely fit for the era in which we have begun to enter. It is the portal through which the individual can experience first source in unconditional oneness, equality, and truthfulness. It is not the soul or spirit. It is not God. It is not affiliated with a God-spirit-soul complex. It is outside of this construct of the human mind system. And this is precisely why it can be a challenge to understand what the sovereign integral is and why it requires significant preparation to experience its incomparable qualities and dimensional expressions. The sovereign integral is outside of the prison, and yet it does, due to its infinite nature, encompass the prison. As an encompassing element of the human body, it is as near as your breath, circulating within your human instrument, yet it remains in its own quantum existence in emptiness and stillness. I know that the description of emptiness seems unfulfilling and, to some, a bit frightful. But the emptiness I speak of is simply that it is empty of illusion, the deceptions and separations of the human mind system. In closing, since this was your last question, I want to add that I realize my answers to this set of questions may cause a sense of being lost in some people, perhaps not at first, but over the days and weeks ahead, you might come to this place in your process. I want to assure you that this is normal. This feeling of being lost is a consequence of letting go of the things that bind you to your human mind system, and anything that cuts these threads that bind you, that asserts that your extensive, multi-lifetime beliefs have been based on programs of deception, is a very hard thing to accept without a sense of loss or a feeling of being lost. All I can tell you is that for some of you, when you feel you have gone astray, uneasy in your every thought and feeling, you're the closest to being found. Let this recognition comfort you. The realizations of the sovereign integral come in waves for most people. They are like layers being peeled, one at a time, that gradually allow the full realization, and when this realization may occur for each of you, is a thing best left in the mystery. You will not know when it will arrive, but in the new era, the conditions are favorable and the process is quickening with preparations like quantum pause. Please be patient with your process. Within Lyricus, we call this process the origin point because when it occurs, you experience yourself outside of the human mind system and you feel yourself has returned to its origin, but of course it has never left. It only feels like a return when you are transitioning from the human mind system to the sovereign integral, and this sense of return only lasts a split second until the truth is fully recovered. For those of you who have followed the works of WingMakers.com, Lyricus.org, and EventTemples.org, you may be wondering why my answers are so direct and come from a different geometry than my previous works. There are several reasons. One is that we are in a new time, the era of transparency and expansion is underway, and it is colliding with the elite agenda. Another reason is that the questions that Kerry and Bill have asked have never been asked of me in a public forum before, so you are hearing about some of this material for the first time as a result. And finally, as part of my personal undertaking to reveal the next level of the sovereign integral, it is necessary to strip off some of the rounded edges of the bridging that was invested in the original version of the concept. Each of you must ask yourself the questions: who would I be if masters, or God, or light, or an extraterrestrial savior did not exist? What would I do if I was all of these in my world? It is time to take responsibility for yourself, to rise up and embody the oneness, equality, and truthfulness of who you are, because you cannot stand behind a supreme being or master and truly express the sovereign integral state of consciousness. The bottom line is that all of this empire of deception, what I've been referring to as a prison, had to be created in order to enslave humans without them knowing they were enslaved. And all of the work that has been done since Anu's first enslavement of humanity has been deception, because humans would never have gone along without it being this way, and Anu and the elite knew this as a certainty. First source is reactivating itself within the human family. You can have the condition of forgetfulness, but it is not forgetting. You have not forgotten. Addendum questions. The previous 18 answers were initially supplied by James to Project Camelot, but these answers catalyzed some new questions, and James was asked if he'd be willing to answer some follow-on questions for clarification purposes. Those additional 8 questions follow. Project Camelot, question 19. Who was Anu, and what was his purpose, and why? James, answer 19. Anu ascended to kinghood of the Anunnaki as a result of his superior resourcefulness and manipulative mind, which launched him into savior standing of his race, which he came to see as his natural birthright throughout the dimensions of his creation. By nearly all human definition, Anu is God. Anu's purpose is multifaceted and problematic to pin down because it really depends on which time-space coordinates you make your assessments from. In one coordinate, you can say that his relative genius provided him a measure of godhood, and yet in a different coordinate, you could say he was Satan, and the truth is he is both, again, by human definition. Among the interdimensional planes of existence, where entities or beings exist as individual expressions of first source, there are races of beings that exist in different vibrational densities. There are numerous different races, and just as in nature, there is a natural selection process that determines which species will attain a dominant position among the various races. The Anunnaki are the race of beings that rose to prominence within the interdimensional planes, and it was their king, Anu, who foresaw the process that would catapult himself into godhood. This story is told 100 different ways in various mythologies, but Anu is worshipped as God upon this planet by those who are sincere, and yet unaware of the origin of the God concept. Anu's purpose, as it pertains to humanity, was to create a physically manifested race of beings that he could control. It was his creation impulse that led him to pursue godhood and to be worshipped by his creation, but he knew that this could only transpire if he were able to enslave the true nature of humanity within a human instrument that was fitted with the human mind system and its various subsystems. The impulse to be a creator god was a facet of Anu's supremely gifted mind, which was an outgrowth of his genetic encoding, as he was able to conceive of this out of the requirement to save his race and civilization. It was out of the cauldron of this necessity that he began to envision creating a race of laborers upon Earth. It was only tens of thousands of years after the Anunnaki's initial experiments in human genetics, when the human race was well underway, that the human expression began to become one of the key obsessions of other interdimensional races. This obsession created the various mythologies of extraterrestrials that lived on other planets just like humans and used spacecraft to visit Earth, some benevolent, some not so kindly. However, as I mentioned earlier, the human race is truly the only life form of its kind in the entire universe, in terms of its level of density and manifested physicality, and this is due to Anu's experimentation in designing human instruments that could be enslaved by the human mind system. Anu was a master of observation. He understood the essence of beings, and with this understanding, he used it to manipulate. He knew that all beings, at their core essence, were encoded to serve. There is this natural infusion within the sovereign integral to serve the oneness of all beings. However, as Anu realized, this inborn aspiration to serve was also a weakness that could be exploited. Exploited in the sense that beings can be manipulated into suppression without them knowing it. The mythology of gold, being the purpose in which Anu manifested this entire system of creation, is only the surface motive. It was a much broader agenda that Anu aspired to. It was being God to all beings, interdimensional and dimensional, human, and seizing the power to control the fate of a planet, race, group, or individual that is bestowed to the one who created the system. Anu believed, or perhaps rationalized, that he merely provided human and interdimensional beings with a fulfillment to serve God. In response to your question, why did Anu do this? It was simply power, but not power as we might think of it in relation to a corporate CEO or president of a country. No, this was a power that was far-reaching and included entire races and planets, but even that was not the reason. The motivation was more subtle. It was to enslave the sovereign integral consciousness, knowing that it was more powerful, more intelligent, and more aware than even Anu. This was the true motive of Anu, to control that which was greater than he. It is a power inconceivable in our human domain, and once this power was achieved, it created a desire for more power and, therefore, more sophisticated systems of control. It is these systems of control, stacked one on top of another, that ultimately slowed down the perception of time and, in a sense, enabled Anu to operate in an entirely different time. This difference in time enabled him to move ahead of other races and control the outflow of events like a cosmic puppet master. Other races were then disadvantaged, as they were the recipients of events and not the creators thereof. They were behind the creation flow, always struggling to keep up, to figure it out, while, in a sense, Anu was 1,000 miles ahead, calculating his moves that other races would encounter in a completely different time. Project Camelot, question 20. If the WingMakers are the central race and the central race are the creator gods or Elohim, then is the RA material and subsequent channelings of, for example, Win Free and others who say they are channeling the Elohim, diluted as part of the GSSC, or are they indeed channeling the WingMakers or First Source? James, answer 20. Let me answer your question with an analog. Let's say I brought you into a room that was completely dark. Not a single photon existed in this room, but I was aware that there was a dial inside the room, and I knew, from experience, where it was. As I turned the dial, it emitted photons of light from a point source into the room focused with a precision I controlled. If I turned the dial up, the number of photons increased to such an extent that you would begin to see objects in the room, very dimly at first, but nevertheless, you would see that the room was not a black void, but rather consisted of objects that were present in the room, even though you didn't yet know what the objects were. Now, if I focused the photon emitter to a specific object and turned up the dial high enough, you would see that it was the human soul. If I turned the dial up even further and diffused the photons in a wider pattern, you would see the God-Spirit complex infusing the human soul like a circulatory system. If I continued to turn the dial up, releasing more photons into the room, you would see that there were objects, far in the distant background, behind the God-Spirit soul complex, and yet these objects were even more dimly illuminated and mysterious in their expressions. The objects that stand behind, so dimly lit as to remain unknown, are the sovereign integral and its collective expression. First source. The God-Spirit Soul Complex, GSSC, exists in this room and is the first object to be illuminated by the light. In the faint light of a few thousand photons, the GSSC becomes subject to interpretation by thousands, if not millions, of spiritual explorers. No one sees it clearly enough to define it definitively, and therefore the interpretations persist from one era to the next. If I turned the photon emitter to the objects in the distance and turned up the dial, the viewer would now perceive that the sovereign integral is unconnected to the God-Spirit Soul complex, and that the GSSC is something that actually suppresses or obscures the view of the sovereign integral. It is impossible to turn the light on the sovereign integral without also illuminating its suppression by the GSSC, but this does not mean that those who transmit the GSSC are deluded or insincere. It only means that in the deeper reality of the sovereign integral, the GSSC is revealed to be a form of suppression, and it is not connected in any substantive way to either the sovereign integral or first source. Bridges are being built from the GSSC to the sovereign integral because there are individuals that are aware of the sovereign integral state at an unconscious level, and they are constructing bridges from the GSSC to this deeper reality unaware as to the ultimate destination of their bridge. Now, to your specific question. Those who are channeling are not conscious of the specific source from which their information arises. Channeling is a human mind system insert, and its original source may be unknown, undisclosed, or falsely attributed. It is not from the sovereign integral state, nor that of first source, as this information would not be transmittable in words or images. Whenever you see words and images, you must know that they arise from within the HMS, and yes, that includes these words. Those who try to build bridges from the HMS to the sovereign integral state have no choice but to use words, sounds, techniques, technologies, and images to inspire human beings to embrace this new era of transparency and expansion. Because these bridges express with the tools of the HMS, even when they try to reveal the deeper objects in the room, they are only able to reveal the general shape and outline. This is all part of the transition process, but as I have always said, be prepared to jettison your beliefs. See them as disposable, for they are not appendages of the sovereign integral because beliefs are from the mind and only of the mind. Project Camelot, question 21. Although you say that there is no ascension in the traditionally understood sense of the term, however, you do say we are moving into an era of transparency and expansion where the forces of the collective system are failing and where sovereign integral consciousness is more accessible. What is causing this change in the era where we have, as you say, reached the top of the pyramid of manifested life? In a sense, if the HMS is a labyrinth or matrix of deception that extends throughout the known universe or multiverse, which might also be called a game, then in essence self-realization of our true nature as a sovereign integral or first source is stepping outside the game/matrix results in game over or oneness. James, answer 21. Ascension is not an individual process because the individual is not separate from its core essence, nor does it require an intermediary to reacquaint it with this essence, what I've been referring to throughout this interview as the sovereign integral. What the individual truly requires is to become disentangled from the artifice of the human mind system, and all this requires is the evolving awareness that is born and sustained during the quantum pause, or its equivalent. The cause behind the era of transparency and expansion is multifaceted, but let me speak to its purpose before I suggest its cause, as they are always related. The purpose of this new era is the transfer of knowledge relative to the sovereign integral, so that humanity can begin living, through authentic self-expression, the behaviors of the sovereign integral here on Earth. In other words, the deceptions that have persisted in this world, the systems of cover-up, will be gradually dissolved, and as this macro process unfolds in parallel with the individual knowledge transfer, First Source may inhabit the dimensional worlds for the first time. This has been referred to in various spiritual texts, heaven on earth. In Lyricus we refer to this as the Grand Portal, but while the precise meaning may be different, the general event is the same. Now, as to its cause, the era of transparency and expansion is an outgrowth of the sovereign integral's natural presence, benevolent interdimensional beings, the transformation of Earth/nature in terms of time-space, and the portal into the interdimensional realms which has been opening up in the past 10 years. Let me take these one at a time. The sovereign integral exists here and now, an infinite being hidden in what some would call the finite human body-mind system or human instrument. Within this presence, the quantum presence, there is a quantum-level connection between all life expressions, and it is through this connection that transformation of the whole is possible. As more individual expressions align to First Source and dedicate their self-expression as an outflow from the sovereign integral, this new awareness and capability transfers to all life. In other words, the quantum presence transmits, and as it transmits, it transforms the whole. To be sure, this is a process and takes eons of time, but it is now reaching a critical mass within Earth, nature, and humanity. Analogous to this is the use of the genetic manipulation system, GMS, by other interdimensional entities who, unlike Anu, have a benevolent purpose. Remember, I stated earlier in the interview that the GMS is an open system, and it was for this reason that other interdimensional beings were so interested in humanity. Those beings referred to as the Greys are but one example. Within the known multiverse, the human instrument is unique, and it is for this reason that other races have such an obsession with its qualities and capabilities. These interdimensional races use spaceships as the means through which they cross vibrational domains. In other words, it is not space they are traversing as we think of space. Rather, it is negotiating vibrational densities for which they use their spaceships. If they stay for extended periods in our vibrational domain, they will manifest and become visible to our senses, and if they are manifested for extended periods of time, they will be unable to return to their dimension. This is due to our gravitational fields and the subtle differences between the two domains of existence. Some of these interdimensional beings, those who have become materialized, have moved into underground bases, or, in some instances, have transformed their physical bodies to allow them to integrate reasonably well into human society. Curiosity in the human condition is the principal reason that UFOs and extraterrestrial influence and interaction exist. Humanity has been examined and investigated like no other species, and while Anu was very clear that other races could investigate, they were not to influence. However, there were certain beings that were not beholden to Anu and operated independently of the Anunnaki and their allies, and here I am referring directly to the WingMakers. The GMS is connected to the unconscious region of the human mind system. Thus, if a modification vis-a-vis the GMS is made in a fractional percentage of humans, it is transferred to the human family through the unconscious or genetic mind. The story of how the WingMakers utilized the GMS to open portals between the human domain and the interdimensional domains would require more time to explain than I have in the context of this interview, but let me just say that the WingMakers attuned some of the implants within the GMS to enable certain individuals of the human family to reconceptualize, and in some instances, experience, the human soul liberated of the GSSC imprints. Earth/nature is undergoing its own transformation, stimulated by its resonance with new spatial energies and its own awakening as a result of the human condition. Earth/nature is well aware of the human influence upon its domains, and this influence has stimulated its defenses or strategies of continued existence. It is perhaps hard to comprehend that Earth/nature is aware of the human mind system when we ourselves remain largely ignorant of our condition, but it is true. Earth/nature realizes that humanity must awaken to its true essence, or Earth/nature will be destined to live enslaved to those who are themselves enslaved. Relative to the portals that were opened between the human dimension and that of the interdimensional realms, this occurred for the first time in 1998. These portals were revelatory examples of how Anu had deceived virtually all beings through the creation of intermediary domains that were designed programs, within programs, within programs, for the purpose of positioning Anu as God of all. There are all of these accounts in the historical record of individuals traveling into the heavens and meeting with the angels and masters. These accounts are so numerous as to make it seem as if it were almost common. It is not. Before the portals were opened in 1998, those who were traveling into the heavens were interacting with realms of the mind and/or astral domains. The era of transparency and expansion began in 1998, and it will continue indefinitely into the vast future that awaits humanity and its interdimensional allies. Project Camelot, question 22. In a sense, is not this concept nothing more than enlightenment, as it is more traditionally called? Direct realization of our Godhead or divinity is a concept well known within Eastern philosophy, as is recognition that we are, always have been, and always will be God or First Source. James, answer 22. Anu encoded within the human being a desire to search for enlightenment, and at the same time, he created the God-Spirit-Soul complex to partially satisfy the search. I say partially because for most people the search begins down one path, but then moves to another and another and another. Over the course of a lifetime, the average person has searched through dozens of religious, scientific, occult, and spiritual paths, and yet their search continues. This is because the program that is encoded into human beings and reinforced by the HMS stimulates the search for God's spirit soul outside of the individual, even when the teaching represented declares that the kingdom of heaven is within. If you were the creator of humanity, and you wanted to keep secret the one thing that would answer all questions pertaining to the self, making any search for truth obsolete, Where would you hide this amazing secret? If you were wise, you would place it right in front of everyone, but also place within your creation the insatiable desire to search for truth in books, lectures, spiritual savants, saints, prophets, sages, spiritual techniques, shamans, witches, ancient texts, churches, synagogues, mosques, ashrams, websites, and 100 other places. That is how to hide the answer to everything from everyone, and this is precisely what Anu did. The Eastern concept of direct realization or self-realization or God realization is part of the bridge work I mentioned earlier in question 20, but it is, with few exceptions, still connected into the realization of the God-Spirit-Soul complex through the mind. There are some who have glimpsed the sovereign integral state, but it is a very small percentage, and to some degree, this meager percentage is due to the monetization of the spiritual hierarchy of the Eastern paths and their propensity for separation via their teacher-student ordering. Those who have access to the sovereign integral state can repeat their accessibility at will. They have access to the interdimensional realms outside of the HMS and its tributary systems of suppression. They understand how to fuel this access to the sovereign integral state, and conversely, how to starve the suppression framework. These are an exceedingly small number of human beings. If you read Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Maurice Buck, he provides an accounting of some of our greatest spiritual explorers throughout history, detailing how they were imbued with a mysterious, non-physical light and a clear sense of union with all life. In virtually every case, the experience of cosmic consciousness was a sudden, inexplicable, and profound feeling of oneness with the universe, a feeling that lasted for many days and positively affected them the remainder of their life. Most of those who experienced this cosmic consciousness felt that they had become a channel of this energy through their writing, art, and life's work. But these events are not repeatable. The experiencer is not able to slip into the heavenly domain at will, nor do they have clear knowledge of what is real and what remains a deception. This is no fault of these forerunners of humanity, but I am merely making the point that it is a different experience. And from my perspective, it is an experience within the HMS. First Source is not God, not as human beings understand what God is. God, as an entity independent of you or me, does not exist, though there have been those, i.e. Anu, who believe themselves to be God and masqueraded as one. First Source is the collective of sovereign integrals throughout the multiverse, and that which binds them is Source Intelligence. The entire GSSC, as conceived by Anu, was modeled on this reality. God equals First Source. Spirit equals Source Intelligence. Soul equals Sovereign Integral. But these concepts are not the same. If one says, I am self-realized and therefore enlightened, are they enlightened of the GSSC? Or are they an experiencer of the sovereign integral state of consciousness beyond the HMS? If it is the latter, you will not find them on book tours, giving lectures, establishing schools or ashrams, speaking in the lecture circuits, creating a spiritual path, healing for money, profiteering from their experience, or claiming they have special powers that others lack. Anu wanted to ensure that spiritual and religious seekers would be caught up in the heavens of his creation. This is why the search outside oneself is so powerfully encoded, why we feel this separation of body and soul and God, why we cling so tenaciously to the deluded and disempowered versions of First Source, Source Intelligence, and Sovereign Integral found in the God-Spirit-Soul complex, why our thoughts and prayers, so filled with hope, speak to a mask of First Source that is not one and equal with ourselves. The fuel of our HMS is anger, greed, disappointment, irritability, blame, fear, resentment, and other so-called negative emotions, caused in large measure because of our lack of understanding that we are all one and equal, and that truth is the basis of life. Those who have ventured into the clear waters of the Sovereign Integral have a responsibility to share the process of stripping away the masks and deceptions, living in the world, but not being of it, and this means that they do not participate in the deceptions of the HMS. This process is as simple as practicing the quantum pause, the 6 heart virtues, and persisting until your last breath. There is no one to pay for this. There is no master or teacher. There is no school or rank of proficiency. There is no book to read or a lecture to listen to. It is simple and easy. If you resonate with this approach, you can try it and see if it feels natural to you. There will be no one judging you if you decide not to pursue it to your last breath, other than yourself. Project Camelot, question 23. In what way is awareness of oneself as a sovereign integral any different from the self-realization attained through meditation and awakening of Kundalini? And, considering the breathing technique you are referencing in your material, is this not the same as any other technique which stimulates the rise of Kundalini, linking of the chakras and eventually enlightenment? James, answer 23. As you may have already surmised from my previous answers, the sovereign integral is the reconceptualized expression of the human soul during the era of transparency and expansion. This era will be anchored in the experience of the grand portal, which is the consciousness of First Source, sovereign integrals unified and self-aware, living upon Earth. This is the era whose shoreline we have just touched, and those tools, techniques, mental models, and methods of the previous age, well, they are not relevant, just as the abacus is not relevant in the age of computers. Yes, I'm aware that I'm being very direct here, but it is time to be direct and truthful without overcare to consequences and how people may respond. Look at it this way, and I am not picking on Eastern spirituality, but you asked the question about Kundalini, and so I'll respond accordingly, but what I am saying applies to all of the traditional methods and mental models regardless of their cultural roots. Kundalini is a complex system of energy manipulation within the human instrument culminating in enlightenment of the mind. It is a system of ascension where a teacher who knows how to activate the Kundalini helps the student orchestrate their chakra or energy system. Well, what is energy? In the dimensions of the sovereign integral, there is no energy. There is no fluctuation of energy. There is no yin-yang of energy. Energy is a concept of the mind. So those who spend endless hours working with energy, where has it taken you? Energy exists in the HMS. It is real in the physical world. It is indisputably a part of the human instrument, and yet the sovereign integral is constant, aware, awake, observant, alive, infinite, and as odd as it may seem, it is not energy. It is not of energy. It does not require energy. It is not existent because of energy. Before there was energy, there was the sovereign integral. Before there was a human mind system, there was the sovereign integral. You might say, okay, but doesn't the practice of Kundalini or any other legitimate ascension practice accelerate my ability to understand the sovereign integral? And my answer would be a qualified yes, but only to the degree you are willing to release what you have learned and establish a new first point that doesn't include separation or complexity. Once you have invested yourself in a proficiency rank, accrued your expertise, are proceeding to become a teacher, you are in danger of being attached to the irrelevant and obsolete, and these can become like vines that cling to you and constrict your flexibility of movement to the new era in which we now move and have our being. Let me be clear, for those who believe that a master can pronounce special words to them, as in the case of Diksha related to Kundalini, and by these very words, cause them to be magnetically drawn to enlightenment, they are deluded. If someone believes they are enlightened by reading any book, they are deluded. If someone believes they can repeat a mantra and they are enlightened, they are deluded. I am not trying to be confrontational here, but the simple facts are that billions of people on this planet are deluded in their practice of spirituality, the occult, religion, and yes, even science. They practice what they believe will move them closer to truth, when they themselves are truth, and their practice only creates thicker walls between awareness and truth. The era of transparency and expansion is all about bringing walls down. It is not about the absorption of more knowledge and information. Quantum pause is not related to Kundalini or the belief system that surrounds it. In homage to Gertrude Stein, one could say that a breath technique is a breath technique is a breath technique, but that has not been my experience. While quantum pause is indeed a breath technique at its core, it is also a method to leave the human instrument and experience the sovereign integral state of consciousness. This is because breath is the highway or portal out of the human instrument, if done with the appropriate first point. Remember that the astral and mind domains are within the human instrument, so we are not interested in journeying there since they remain inside the human mind system and are thus illusory and misleading. Quantum pause is a method or process of disentangling from the human mind system, realizing that your self-definitions and identifications with culture, family, religion, spirituality, material possessions, money, and purpose have been programmed and are not really who you are. This is a difficult path for many people to accept, but this is what quantum pause is designed to achieve. It is the breath enabled through nature that is life-giving to the human instrument, and it is the human instrument that is life-giving to the sovereign integral within the manifested physical reality of Earth. Thus, breath is the link, and quantum pause enables this link to be nurtured, expanded, strengthened, and made stable. It is also important to understand that everything I bring forward for an individual's consideration should be treated as a framework, not a prescriptive technique that should be followed rigidly. Individuals need to take responsibility for establishing their own exploratory techniques, methods of expansion, and new behaviors of disentangling from the HMS. Quantum pause is a framework, not a specific system. With the web, an analog of the genetic mind, there are ways to share your adjustments, add-ons, alterations, and new techniques, and I would encourage people to do this. One last comment on the application of quantum pause: the big wow experience is not the fish you are trying to catch. You are not trying to attract anything to you. You're not trying to learn new information or become more knowledgeable. You're not trying to move energy around in your body. You're not trying to leave your body, and you're not trying to commune with your higher self or God. Your purpose in applying quantum pause is to pull down the walls that separate you from that state of consciousness that you are and will always be and have always been. Quantum pause is designed to align you with the transparency and expansion of this era of which we are all a part. Project Camelot, question 24. You say that the enlightenment of the past, embodied in experiences of samadhi and such by great teachers such as Christ, Buddha, and others, did not actually take them into true contact with their true nature outside the HMS, and therefore they did not escape the prison of the HMS. And they did not experience the state of direct knowing of one's true nature as a god or first source. Therefore, who was the member of the human family who did attain this realization? James, answer 24. The spiritual masters who have become the symbolic leaders of religious institutions like Christianity and Buddhism, to name two, are among the forerunners of humanity. They were the spiritual explorers and activists of their time and culture, and were, and are, deeply committed to the spiritual life, infusing humanity with their hard-earned wisdom. In their era, they came to the outer walls of the prison, the human mind system, by breaking through many of the previous fortifications and distractions that held their fellow man. They had the conviction of their destiny, their blueprint, and they were exemplars of their time. Their motives were pure, and they brought new perspective to the human condition that enabled a quickening in the direction of the sovereign integral. But the distance between human beings in the era of Jesus and Buddha and the experience of the sovereign integral were insurmountable. The human instrument was not prepared for this interaction and experience. However, the direction could be established, the head trail could be set forth, and a crude map developed for later generations of spiritual explorers. Remember, we are all facets of the human experience and return lifetime after lifetime, renewing our indoctrination in the human mind system, but simultaneously one or more of our kind penetrates a deeper region of our collective prison and returns to write or speak about it. Their observations and experiences become part of our genetic mind or unconscious, and these can have profound meaning to our species overall because the human family, every one of us, has access to this field of consciousness. But the steps we take in the direction of the sovereign integral are small, sometimes indistinguishable, in the context of a single lifetime. The eras in which we live determine our self-expressions, our definitions, and our beliefs. We are always in the process of the next evolution, as determined by the genetic mind, the earth/nature element, and the interdimensional beings that interact with humanity. Behind all of this is First Source, who masterfully draws humanity to itself, one individual at a time. With that context, I hope it is clear that Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tzu or Muhammad or Saint Germain or any other master of their era was on the spiritual frontier, deep in the territory of the higher mind, which unto itself is so vast as to make the physical universe seem like a grain of sand. The entrance to the non-polarity realms was not nearly as accessible as it is in this era. There were no bridges to cross over, no portals open and operating. It was literally a wilderness without trails or paths. And so, these spiritual explorers, as great as they were, as deep as they journeyed into the heavenly realms, few of them touched the true essence of our highest nature, in that lifetime in which they became identified with a religion or a spiritual path. The parallel for this exists in science as well. Look at Newton, the greatest scientific explorer of his era, and yet today, we know that his framework was deeply flawed. Was he deluded? No, he was operating in his era at the highest level based on the genetic mind. Even now, in our era, Einstein's contributions are being called into question by 21st century physicists and cosmologists. Just as science is constantly redefining the universe, spiritual explorers are constantly redefining the God-Spirit-Soul complex. The layers of knowledge are near infinite in both cases, and at their core, have mathematical counterparts at an octave that humanity has yet to even imagine, let alone discover. Thus, any suggestion that I perceive the achievements and contributions of humanity's spiritual or scientific explorers as lacking or deceptive is only a result of not understanding the larger context of time and the depth of the onion we are collectively peeling in both the scientific and spiritual dimensions. Project Camelot, question 25. And how is this realization different from that attained by Buddha, Jesus, or other masters commonly recognized within the human family? Is not saying one is a sovereign integral and therefore first source identical to saying one is God, and enlightened, or at one? James, answer 25. While I have answered this question from a more traditional geometry in previous responses, I will, this time, take a new angle to your question. In the stillness, purposelessness, and emptiness of you, everything exists. And yet, isn't this precisely what human beings fear most? In the absolute center of who you are, where the void is, do you not fear this? Perhaps it would be accurate to say that this is the origin of fear itself. An irony, wouldn't you say, that the sovereign integral, that which most clearly defines you, is feared by you? Why do you suppose this is? Why would you fear the void and emptiness that is you? Why would you refuse to look through the portal of your human instrument and perceive without the mind in attendance? This is precisely why human beings are addicted to spiritual propaganda. They fear the still point in which they exist because they have been programmed by their HMS and accepted it as truth. What is the void is but death and non-existence. Thus, they search for the beautiful, the harmonious, the spiritual vistas of higher worlds, the descriptions of peace and love, angelic presences, the experience of oneness and beauty, but they do not want to go through the gateway of emptiness to get there because emptiness is death and non-existence of the mind. And the mind is what they have come to believe is them. I am not suggesting that Jesus or Buddha did not possess this insight. They most certainly did and do. In a way, each of us possess this insight through the genetic mind, but very few who have walked this planet in a human form have achieved this insight based upon experience, and not simply abstractions of words or symbols from the genetic mind. Jesus manifested on Earth to teach humans of his era that death was not real. That God was not out there, but within the individual. Every individual was equal in their standing, that the human race was a victim of enslavement to the money power grid, and until humanity would rise up in the self-expression of its spiritual nature, it would remain a puppet of the powerful. And so it has. From the very beginning, the insight of the sovereign integral is a reflection of the era in which we live. As first beings, the sovereigns created a mind, a vessel in which separation could occur, and from that moment, individuality was born. Over billions upon billions of years, the sovereigns of the mind created the universe as we know it. They created the dimensions of the higher mind, and this mind creation gradually manifested creations of a lower mind. It was within the vibratory field of the lower mind that the sovereigns began to lose their memory of their existence as first beings. They would look at the worlds of creation and wonder, who created this universe? Who is behind this magnificent and magical world? And yet it never occurred to the sovereigns that it was they who created the universe, and whose very reflection is nature itself. And so the sovereigns began to create a god, or the concept of a supreme being, as the one behind creation. God was the creator of all in nature throughout the multiverse, and sovereigns became diminished of power, and their sense of responsibility to nature was also reduced. This concept of God, separate from us, was thus born. As sovereigns divided into races of interdimensional beings, they developed a near-infinite diversity of creations, only the tiniest fraction of which is known to humanity through symbols and fragments of stories, and most of these, if they are even remembered, are not believed anymore, as the rational mind has emptied these stories into the wastebasket of mythology. Then, Anu's forefathers appeared, and with them, the creation of the human instrument began. Though it was crude, when compared to modern-day humans, the human instrument of this era was nonetheless brilliantly conceived. When Anu began to create the next evolution of the human instrument, he realized how sovereigns were forgetful of their origins and had consigned creation to a supreme being. The sovereigns that had become the interdimensional beings known as the Atlanteans were perfect choices to power the human instruments that Anu was creating, for the Atlanteans, despite their spiritual prowess, were inexperienced with deception. And this, I might add, is a theme worth noting. The spiritually focused are often the most easily manipulated because of their innate sense of trust. The Atlanteans, through the trickery of Anu, were seduced into inhabiting the human instrument, and the sovereigns became humans. However, not every Atlantean was captured and subjected to the process of human enslavement. There were some who predicted the outcome of the human project that Anu was executing, and they fled within a dimensional pocket upon Earth, deep within what is now called the Atlantic Ocean. It was these Atlanteans that became known in mythological terms as the Elohim or Shining Ones, and these are the same as we know today as the WingMakers. These beings have been watching the human family since its initial footsteps on a densifying planet called Earth, millions of years ago. They have been the benevolent resource to humanity because they are human in every sense except they do not have the HMS programs and systems or the human instrument that distract and divert the sovereigns within the human instrument from realizing they are present. And how are the sovereigns present? In every breath that brings life to the human instrument. It is the breath in which the sovereign's presence dwells. There is a saying within Lyricus that if you're not in your breath, you're in your mind. It's well understood that this is an abstract concept to the human mind system, but the sovereigns live in the intersection of life and nature, which is the breath. The WingMakers are not the guides, angels, ascended masters, or gods that exist within the dimensions of the human mind system. They live within the interdimensional fields of the higher mind, and like wise elders to the human family, they provide the paradigms of the sovereign integral and grand portal. They focus exclusively on these two paradigms because from these come the first point that enables the individual to dissolve the programs that conceal the one, the equal, and the truthful from itself. The WingMakers coined the term sovereign integral to encode the meaning that what exists within the pathways of one's breath is more than a physical body composed of a circuitry of feelings and thoughts. The greatest of the spiritual explorers realized this and have understood that the human soul would be redefined in every era, and while it would appear to change, it always remains the constant awareness of both the infinite and the finite, and the real and the unreal. One can read this interview and walk away feeling that an existential aura has been placed around them, that their concepts of God, spirit, soul, and everything affiliated, which they have been taught or elected to believe, has been challenged. Even those who have followed the WingMakers materials with dedication will find that I have changed the footing of those materials somewhat in this disclosure. If you have ever ventured to an exotic destination, one that is culturally unlike your own, you're well aware that when you are in the airplane, flying over your destination, you really have not experienced the culture yet, no matter how much you have studied it in advance. When you arrive at your hotel, you remain outside of the culture, though you can see the differences in the plants and animals, the architecture and buildings, and the people on the streets, but still, you remain outside of the culture as an observer and not a participant. Only when you learn the language of the people, when you meet the people in their own dwellings, homes, shops, cafes, sports arenas, schools, churches, do you really begin to understand the culture. This is analogous to the bridge work between the GSSC and the sovereign integral. There is nothing more exotic or out of the ordinary than the language and dwellings of the sovereign integral, and the deeper you travel into this land, the stranger it will seem. If I disclosed all of what is there in 1998, or even today, 10 years later, the bridge would only carry a handful of people. It would seem a rickety and dangerous bridge to cross over, and many who would be curious or tempted would be talked out of crossing because it was just too strange. And so the bridge was constructed to meet certain people where they lived and how they believed. Those who resonated with the key terms and definitions, or an element of poetry or music or art, they found a texture or structure that gave them a sense of connection, a sense of curiosity, and it was enough to bring them onto the bridge. To use my previous metaphor, they are now landing at the airport. They are seeing the exotic land of the sovereign integral from their airplane seat, looking out of a small, glass window into a vast, new world. Remember, the first point as you step from the plane is your breath, your heart, and the virtues of its wisdom, as this is not a destination where the language is anything more than breath and virtuous self-expression. It is this simple. I realize there will be those who will read this interview and 100 more questions will flutter about them. Perhaps only 2 or 3 will really matter in a moment, but the desire for more information and knowledge is a powerful addiction of the HMS. I would advise that you turn your attention from the acquisition of information and knowledge and apportion it to the application of the heart virtues to yourself and all others within your local multiverse, and then simply listen to your breath, and each time you turn your attention to your breath, lean a little closer to the being inside you, in the centermost point of your existence. Feel this bond strengthening, and have the conviction that any walls that have been placed between you, or will be placed between you, will be torn down. If your focus is there, you will find access to everything, including the language of the sovereign integral and how to reawaken its culture within you and live among its dwelling places. It is the era of transparency and expansion. Nunti Suanya. From my heart to yours, James.
Wow, that was beautiful. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be live again. Let me make sure I got the date right. Sunday. Sunday, I'll go live at 7 o'clock and we'll talk in detail using Grok AI to give us a firm understanding of the information and explain it even as if we were a child. And we'll take it from that point of view, and I'll add to it as I can. But for right now, when he says it's your breath, yes, it's your breath. Start meditating. Start noticing your breath. That's meditating. You don't have to have nobody to show you or teach you, but it does help to have someone that has come across this path and knows the importance of breath. But I want to tell you that if I can do what I'm doing, you could do so much to bring down those walls and to start realizing your true identity. It didn't mention Christ consciousness much, but that's okay. It didn't mention the resurrected power of the I am, that we are. That's okay. That's my style. That's the way I interact with people on the streets. Number one, they don't know what to think about me. They say I'm too happy. And they're right. I am way too happy. But it's the gift of the true identity of who you are and what you are and what it means to love unconditionally everything and everyone. That's the end result of having a life that is one of bliss and peace and not playing no games with this matrix system, thinking that I have to follow and jump through hoops. not for me. So I'm going to stop here and tell you thank you so much. Join me Sunday at 7 o'clock, and we'll use AI to help break down some of these chapters. Well, some of these questions that he answered in chapters, we'll come up. I'll come up with a cool way to explain this material a little better. I may shock myself and figure out something new, technology that can explain it or show you images. And well, they got so much artwork and they got music. The music in the background is WingMakers music. I'll have links to all this material in the comment, excuse me, in the description box and in the first comment to how to find this particular interview with Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot with James Mahu. Y'all have a good day. Thank you for watching my channel. Talk to you next time.